Jane Eagle dedicated many late nights and unwavering passion to a call of duty. Through her groundbreaking work and commitment with which she tackled projects, she became known as the city's environmental stalwart. She is bowing out of service after 33 years and describes her time in the city as fulfilling and fascinating.
Mrs. Eagle, after how long are you retiring?
Well, if you count Sandton, I joined the city actually in 1990. That was the Sandton Town Council, as it was known then, which later became, when the city merged, it became part of the city. That's why I say that's when I joined the city, because it became part of the bigger city. So I joined as a town planner. I went to work as a town planner in the town planning department, as it was in those days, of the Sandton Town Council, in 1990.
1990.
Yeah.
That's way back. Mrs. Eagle, just as an icebreaker, if you had to summarize your time at City of Joburg in just one word, what word would you use?
Gee, that is a challenge. I would say fascinating.
Fascinating. That's an interesting one. Why?
Well, because I've learned such a lot. I feel as if I've been so privileged to work with the most interesting people. I mean, the city has got so many challenges. They are not straightforward. And I have done so many different jobs actually at the city. I've worked in so many different fields. So although I've been here for 30, how many years now? 33. It doesn't feel like I did one job. I never did one job. And so in the different jobs I've worked, I've just met such interesting people. The challenges that we've had, the information I've learned, the problem solving. I've been exposed to so many different people, so clever people, interesting people. So for me, every day's been a challenge, and it's been a learning, which is what makes it fascinating. I've never been bored. I've never been bored in this job. I've been excited by, the things I've learned that help you then to deal with the city's challenges. So funny, I've never thought of that word either, but that's the word that springs to mind.
So I think fascinating actually summarizes it up quite well.
Fulfilling. I mean,
Yes.
You could just say fascinating and fulfilling, really.
Mrs. Eagle, take me through your current role as Deputy Director. When were you appointed in this role, and what were some of the responsibilities and duties in your current role?
Gee, that I don't even know how long I've been doing this role, because it's sort of merged from a previous role. I think I've been in this role about 8 years. And it was after we merged the environmental department with the previous department that was called infrastructure and services, and they had the oversight over the entities, over City Power, Joburg Water, Pick It Up. So we merged, because it was seen that environment has a lot to do with energy, water, waste, and it was around that time that then I was moved into this position. Previously, I looked after catchment management and water quality, so it was sort of a sideways move. And it's difficult to describe what I do in terms of my current title, because it doesn't really sum up everything I do. Because I've been here so long, there are layers in the institutional knowledge I've built up. And in a way, I draw on everything for the current job, and so I tend to interfere also in a lot of other things, because I've worked in so many different sectors. So it's open space planning, so it's dealing with the greening of the city, trying to make sure people have sufficient parks, but it's much more than just looking after parks, looking after open spaces. It's also using greening to address some of our big challenges, like climate change is a huge challenge for the city. And if you look at how international cities are dealing with climate change, like flooding, heat effects, increased temperatures that are causing people to get sick and causing our ecosystems to be out and crops don't grow. but also these storms we're getting very intense storm events. So flooding is a huge issue. So greening can help you deal with all those problems of the city, because nature slows down water, reduces your flooding, or it cleans water, helps you with water quality. It cools the temperature. So in my job, although open space planning sounds like it's around parks, it's got nothing to do with just parks. It's managing the whole landscape. It's also looking at water, what water does on top of the earth and what water does underneath the ground. So I've ended up sort of, not really by design, just because I learned along the way, becoming the person that a lot of people in the council phone for groundwater problems, because I've just developed an understanding of groundwater and what happens with groundwater. And we've got lots of properties across the city that are hugely negatively affected by groundwater. Their houses crack, and the houses, their children get sick, and then they come to the council to say, look at the problem we've got with groundwater.
You were saying how you, to some extent, even became the go-to person
for groundwater.
Yes.
Yeah, so you know what? I trained as a town planner. And when I came to work at the city, that's what I did. I was a town planner. I worked at Sandton, and then from Sandton, within about a year and a half, I moved to the City of Johannesburg, into what was in those days called the Urban Strategies Division. And I was the head of the Strategic Issues Division, and then the head of the Structure Plans Division. So we didn't have a corporate strategy unit in those days. So we did the economic thinking around new challenges, housing issues, infrastructure issues. The planning department was like the think tank. So we did the structure plans for new development areas. There wasn't an IDP. So I headed up those units at that time. And I used my planning skills. And I actually, my biggest job there was the inner city. I worked on the inner city for many years, and that was the most, you see again, fascinating place, because the inner city is a melting pot of, it was a time going through migration, huge in-migration, people traveling down from Africa, so we had huge housing issues, where do people stay, the economic issues, and then transport issues, because it was a hub with people traveling, a lot of bringing goods down and then going back into Africa. So we were sort of the hub of everything. So that would keep you busy forever, the inner city. And I was the main planner for the inner city. So, and I can see when I go to the inner city, I can see my projects taking root there. I always joke with people to say, everyone thinks that's Mandela's bridge, but it's actually my bridge. It just has his name. Because it came out of an urban design framework that we did for the inner city, which stressed you need to connect the city here, you must build this bridge. And ultimately it got built, so I feel very happy when I drive there. I think, you see, our bridge got built. So that was my planning work. And I mean, I can tell you stories about being an inner city planner, because we were dealing with communities, and inner city was right up to Bertram's. So, there were issues of buildings that wouldn't pay for services, and then they'd get cut off. So I've been at meetings in notorious buildings like Crest Hill in Hillbrow, at 8 at night by candlelight, because the thugs in the building didn't want the electricity reconnected for all the poor paying residents. So we were sitting there with no electricity having our meeting. I tell you, there were schools who had sports facilities on the top floor in a block of flats. I used to have to go and have meetings in Bertram's, where we'd get the guys who were sleeping homeless on the mountainside to come to the meeting in the school hall. We were right down there. And so you are dealing with the strategic level and then also the community level, right down there, making a difference to people's lives, actually on the ground. And Bertram's was also interesting, because, we had the drug lords there who also didn't want us to make lives better for people, because they had their drug networks there. So that, they didn't really want us to come and start meddling with as a planner. Anyway, so I've been around and seen a lot of different things. So that was my inner city years. And then I think, when did we hand it over? Because then it was 1994. 1994 we were still the city of Joburg, but then we became a uni city, and we were amalgamating all the smaller councils into one unified council, the Greater Johannesburg Metropolitan Council it was called, for a year or two. And I was still the inner city person, and we were working with the interim council and the business forum from the city, and then the community. We had a sort of a three-way partnership for trying to do inner city regeneration. That was a wonderful period. We worked with the province as well, some real characters, some of the politicians I worked with. A few of the colleagues are still around who were with us back then. And we travelled to see cities over the world, other inner cities, how other countries dealt with their inner city problems of homelessness, etc. And then it was 1994, and that transition then became the uni city with the 4 local councils. So then there was a deployment exercise. I can't remember whether we had a choice or whether we were just deployed there, but I ended up in the Northern Metro Local Council. And I was still working with planning at that stage. But then I moved for a short time to look after economic development, believe it or not. So I did a bit of economic development, and mostly around the Randburg area, because now it was the Northern Metro Council, which stretched from the sort of Randburg area down to parts of north of Soweto. And then my boss at the time, my planning boss, said to me, we're creating this environmental department. It was a new department that was being created, and she said, you would really be good at this, you must apply for the job. So I applied for that job, and then I became the head. We were called executive officers at that time. I became the head of the new environmental management department at the Northern Metro Local Council. So that was the point at which I sort of switched from my training, because I trained as a town and regional planner in Durban, and I moved from pure planning into environmental management. But it's part of the same thing, really, because as a planner, environment had been one of the things we had to look at. It's just now got a lot more attention, so it was kind of environment big, But I used a lot of my planning, and I've always gone on, and I think it's probably what makes me quite unique sometimes, is that where you change the environment is where you build, where you put new townships, where you build a building, where you put up some new townhouses, you transform the land. So if you care about the environment, the way that you are developing the city is one of the critical things you have to address. So my planning has really stood me in such good stead to be able to understand how we are changing the earth, because you can have a lot of science, all these lovely scientific reports, and scientific knowledge, but if you don't know how to integrate it into the planning process where you're actually approving developments, then it doesn't go anywhere. So that I've figured that out long ago, that as a planner, this is where it matters, this is where it counts. So I used my planning knowledge in my job, looking at the environment, because I wasn't a scientist. And then we were merging. You remember they had the 4 local councils, and then they put us back together again. I think in 1996 they put us all back together again. And so in that, I was, for a short time, for about a year, I was what was called the convener of the environmental function, because a lot of the other heads of the other local councils one went off to the World Bank, one went off to City Park, so I was kind of left as the last one. And then I coordinated the environmental function for the whole city, for the uni city, and I helped establish that whole new department, write the job descriptions, put the structures together, manage all the projects that everyone had left behind. We had a lot of donor projects, lovely projects from Danish donors and others. So I was kind of steering the ship for that department for a year, and helping to establish that new unified environmental management department, which is the seeds of this department. So that's why you see I sort of regard myself as a bit of an induna, and I sort of interfere in everything, because I feel so personally connected. It's like that chair, I know where that chair came from. That chair was ordered for the pension one-stop centres that never got built, and I was part of the creation of the department, of setting the mandate, and some of the projects still have their roots in projects that we established right back in 1996. And then we restructured. So at that time, we all had, when we established the environmental department, I was just a caretaker, and then we got a new a director at that time, and we were still under town planning. So we were under broad planning. There was transport, economic development, planning, environment, and then we kind of grew up, and everyone said this environmental department doesn't belong under planning anymore, it needs its own space. And so they elevated that director to become an executive director, and that's when we kind of broke away and became our own environmental department. And in that transition, I was managing climate change, water, waste, and air quality, all in one. It was called environmental quality management, so that's what it was called in those days. And as part of that, we established the air quality monitoring stations that we have today in the city. So that network, even the stations that my air quality colleagues are looking after, I was the one that established them, because Parks Tau, who was our MMC at the time, came and said, I've got money, you need to get going and make us an air quality network. So we did. And we also developed the first air quality management plan. It was very exciting. We were the first city to do that. And so that's why when I say I interfere in everything and anything, when you've established it, you look over the fence to see, are people taking care of the thing that you created, and you still have interest in that sector. And that's when I say I had to learn. I mean, I was a town planner, I wasn't a scientist, but our communities are very generous, our professional communities, they are so generous with their knowledge. So I learned so much from WITS, from all the consultants we worked with. They were fabulous. They would just share their knowledge, and I had to go on a fast learning curve. But again, my planning, I knew about the strategic level. I just didn't have all the detailed, specific science, what one pollutants should measure. I had to read and learn. And that's the thing. If I was mentoring people in the city, I want to say you have to go out looking for knowledge. You have to learn. You have to find things. Answers don't come to you. You have to go looking for them. You actually have to be open to every day learning something and making yourself better to deal with the problems that come at you. So that was air quality. Then I had to choose. We decided air quality was going to be its own sector, and I had to choose between air and water, and I chose water, because water was my first passion. And I once had a town planning colleague who I credit him with, it's like putting on new glasses and you can never see the world in the same way anymore. And I put on glasses one day, driving over a bridge and looking at a river, and then seeing the storm water and what runs off this road all goes into that river, and all that sand goes into that river, and there's the problem. So I became completely fascinated with drainage, how we just dump water into rivers, and then we wonder why the rivers are polluted, they flood, they take trees down, they kill off all the fish. So there was such a link between urban development and what was happening in the rivers. So I was then managing, believe it or not, as a town planner, I managed water quality and catchment management. So catchment management has links to what I'm doing today, or what I've been doing today, which is landscape managing. You're managing everything that happens within a catchment, and all the rain that falls is going to ultimately arrive in the valley, in the river. So what you do on the top of the mountain is affecting what's in the river. So if the politicians and the councils and the communities want clean rivers, you've got to think about what's happening everywhere. And by the way, green space also helps you filter the litter as well. So now I'm digressing, but I was doing environmental quality management. I inherited, when we created the Unicity, one of the companies that was set up was Johannesburg Water. It was the time when we were setting up all the companies. So that transition to create the Unicity, we called it Igoli 2002. And when I packed my boxes here, I found fascinating notes from way back then. It was very well done. They had a 6-month process where we were totally engaged as the officials in that process. It wasn't like now where the politicians go off and the top management and all decide what's the best structure for the city. In those days, they consulted us. We were taken along with that process. It was fabulous under Ketso Gordon. And in that process, they also created then these companies. And I inherited the water quality specialists from the, they were previously in the lab. We had a scientific services division in Old Joburg, and they were going to take the water quality people to Johannesburg Water, and they said, no, but we can't sit there. We can't be judge and juror. We can't be doing oversight over water quality of an entity and be part of them. We need to come back to the city. So I inherited them, and then we developed the water quality, or they already had one. We then established it as the city's water quality monitoring program. So you can see again, I've now got my feet in the water quality monitoring program because it was established, or I took it over and made it the city's. And I inherited those scientists. So I had to learn all about the water quality parameters and what kills E. coli off and what's the safe level for E. coli in the rivers and what are the pollutants and the laboratory issues and quality control. So then I became a sort of generalist expert in water quality. And water quality, again, everything that's happening around in the urban area is affecting your water quality. So you get involved in anything, all the urban management issues, car washes and whether people don't have sanitation and informal settlements and government departments that are not managing their, public works, that aren't managing some of their, the prison, they are some of the pollutants, abattoirs, you name it, and then illegal, factories. So I had to learn all about that, and it tied quite closely with all the work I'd done in the inner city, because the inner city also was a lot of urban development challenges, So I always had to work quite closely with environmental health because of all the urban management problems and the health issues. So then I became that was managing water quality and catchment management, and then one day. And I had established a catchment management policy, and that section was actually running quite well. We really had, I think, a very good handle on what we were going to do to improve the city's rivers, both at a strategic level and at a local level. And then my boss at the time, a lovely man called Shawnee, who's now sitting in the National Environmental Department, he came and said, Jane, I want you to take a secondment to look after open space, because you've managed to get catchment management on its way, but open space is still suffering, and that's, in a way, it's the pillar for biodiversity, for water quality. We need this grounding. So you're a town planner, and it has a lot to do with open space. So won't you take the sideways move? So I negotiated for a while, and then I said, okay, I'll do it. Because in a way it brought me back to my home of planning and the integration between environment and planning. And so that's how I ended up in this position. It was like a sort of a sideways secondment. But we've sat without a head for catchment management for about 7 years now. So in a way I have never left catchment management, because it just ties so much how you're managing your stormwater, whether you take out green space and pave it, it all ties together. Environment is an integrated sector. You have to look after all the pieces to make the whole right. And that's why I've gone on interfering, because I've done a bit of everything. I was around for the World Summit. We held the World Summit on climate change, and I was the interim head, and then Flora came in at that time. Then I was becoming the climate change person. A lot of the projects I inherited way back when we put the Unicity together were waste projects. So, I've got a passion for waste and what we're doing about waste, and also because waste is the thing that's killing all our open spaces, actually waste and waste pickers, unfortunately, waste reclaimers, along with the homeless. So I don't stick to one route, and I never have, Yes. And the problem is also I've got institutional knowledge about all things. So people will come and say, Jane, can you tell us what did you do about this 8 years ago? And then I pull out the file, and there's the story.
Some of the most meaningful memories over the years are seeing her projects take root and her contributions to rivers, catchments, and wetlands. The Nelson Mandela Bridge was realized through the inner city urban design framework she championed. Today, she still smiles when crossing the bridge.
That's how
Mrs.
you
Eagle,
find me.
you get this little sparkle in your eye when you start talking about your work over the years, as you just took us through, especially when you were talking about water quality. What do you love most about your job in your current role?
You know, I've been reflecting, first of all, on, you reflect on what's the legacy you've left. Was it worth it? Your 32 years, did you actually change? I like to change the world. That's actually why I joined local government. And I think it's why a lot of people come from national government even. They even come from national government to join local government, because you can change the world really at local government, because you're dealing with real life day-to-day issues. So I love there are quite a few things I've loved. I love the creativity that local government gives you. And I tell all my new staff coming in here, there are prescribed things you have to do. The IDP says you must do this. There's a scorecard, a business plan, all those formal things. But at the end of the day, you have to look at the real world out there and say, what is it you need to fix? And you have to keep your eye on that ball and not just become a bureaucrat. You have to actually go on fixing things. So I love the fact that you have the creativity and in a way the latitude. There's freedom at local government to actually say there's a project we need to do and to bring it to the forth. And if it's got merit, you will be heard, and it might even happen. So I've actually managed to make projects. Nobody gave me my projects. I inherited one project when I came to the inner city as the planner. Right back then, they'd done a social survey. But all the other projects I've done, I looked and said, there's a problem, we need to do that. And then I'd go to my bosses and say, I think we need to do this. And they'd say, fine, I'll find you the money, do it. So there's a freedom to apply your intelligence, your problem-solving abilities to actually real-life solutions on the ground. And so basically you can make a difference. You really can make a difference. And that is what is exciting to me. When I drive around the city, I think, I've actually got the ability to influence that, to fix that, I love that. And then, as I say, just also because it's been so diverse and I've just learned so much, that has just excited me. And then my absolute passion, well, I've always done, even as a planner, I've always done my work to try and save the planet out there for all the creatures of the world. I mean, when I go on a site, I'm thinking, can a mongoose survive here? What are we going to do that crowned eagle is still nesting in that tree? Can we still let that crowned eagle go on nesting there? And are we going to chase all these grass owls away? And how can we integrate the development so that the grass owls can still stay here? So it's often about compromise. You have to compromise. You have to try and look at from everyone's perspective, because if you just say no, it doesn't work. You've always got to negotiate. So I like to feel that, the thing that I look back on, I've saved a few wetlands in my time, because wetlands are linked to water, but wetlands are living things. There's beautiful butterflies and birds and clean water coming out of those wetlands. They are absolutely wonderful things that we have to protect, and they were not being protected because people didn't know where the wetlands were, and developers don't tell you they're there. They say it's a bit of marshy land and they dig it up, and then you get all these poor residents phoning to say they're digging up a wetland, the bulldozers in there. So I worked out we don't know where they are, so I decided we must do an audit of wetlands. So I got an audit done of wetlands, and to this day we now have a beautiful map layer up on the city's maps that says that's where wetlands are. That's a seep wetland, that's a valley bottom wetland. And when a developer comes and doesn't declare the wetland, we call up the site and we say, but our wetland day says there's a big wetland there. We think there's a wetland. And then we're not always right, but it's mostly right. And then they're forced to go and investigate and come back, and then we can say, okay, how are we going to modify your development to protect the wetland? So I love the wetland layer. That is the thing that makes my heart sing when I think, what have I left behind, apart from the inner city? But the wetland layer. And then my passion is also stormwater, as I said, not just shoving stormwater into a pipe into the river where it's going to cause trouble and take all the litter with it. Actually managing that water so it feeds the groundwater, so it feeds the plants and it doesn't cause trouble. And that, I don't know why, I just became absolutely fascinated by drainage. And so I developed the stormwater bylaws were developed by an engineer in Johannesburg Roads Agency who left, and he put them in my hands. He said, you must champion these. And so we got a stormwater design manual that I hope is going to change something. We're trying to get people kicking and screaming to actually implement it, and one of the things I regret is that I'm leaving before it's really been fully embraced and implemented. And there are a lot of structural issues and organizational issues and system issues we need to change to get it properly implemented. It needs a lot of capacity, but it's the right way to go. It's where the rest of the world's going. So I'm very happy. I feel as if at least I changed the course of the ship, you know. I haven't finished, the journey still there, and there are other people here that will have to take that journey forward. So, you know, I'm a bit of a control freak. I'm every day saying, please, promise me you'll look after this. Promise me you'll continue to stand firm on that issue and you'll continue to champion that and don't let that project die. You know, I'm a bit of a missionary in that way.
Her words of wisdom to those following in her footsteps are, be honorable and brave.
But listening to you, it sounds like you've steered the ship in the right direction.
I
Mrs.
hope
Eagle.
so.
Mrs. Eagle,
A lot of unfinished business, I regret. But
it's
anyway.
a bittersweet.
But you know, it is bittersweet, exactly. And there are, one thing I've managed in the last year, we were very under-resourced. I brought in a whole lot of new people. A wonderful woman who unfortunately is on maternity leave to hand over some of the open space issues to, and then a lovely team to hand the catchment issues to. And I've spent a lot of time just trying to, I talk fast and I talk a lot because I feel so like I need to get it all out. I need to pass on all that knowledge. You know, they get files dumped on their desk every day. Yeah, so hopefully.
Mrs. Eagle, 33 years is a lifetime and even more. And I've heard you've spoken about your contributions towards the Mandela Bridge, air quality management plan, establishing the map of wetlands. Let's talk about some of the highlights and achievements, highs and lows over the 33 years. Summarize that for me and take me through it.
Sure. Well, I think first of all the inner city. As I say, some of the projects, but also we did a whole regeneration strategy, and it didn't all work out well because you can't control everything. But working with the community and some of the NGOs around inner city regeneration, I mean, that was really, I'll never regret that. Inner cities are just fascinating. They are melting pots, and so all the work we did around the inner city, they had subsequent strategic frameworks, but we had a strategic partnership going with, as I say, with business, everything. And I think we really did a lot. There were new housing developments that came in. I still see some of them there. The transport networks we improved. So that was achievement. The one thing we didn't achieve, we still wanted a big inner city park, and that still has never existed. Promised for years, but never happened. And then, back to, I mean, you know, well, I've done housing developments there in Jeppiestown. I drive through, and there's the Oval Housing Scheme, and I think there was my housing scheme. There's another one down near the Oriental Plaza. There's a block, also in a city housing scheme. I was involved with that one and making that happen. So I see all those parts of my inner city life. It's quite hard to remember back then, though, because it's quite a long time ago. And so then my other achievements are more, my highlights were the air quality was, just from a science point of view, you know. It's not something I wanted to stay with forever, but I have to say just what I learned there, fabulous. And then around rivers and catchment management, what I learned from that community and the wetland community, there were forums, and it was early days of the wetland community even developing new organizations, new standards for what you have to become to accredit as a wetland specialist. And that community was probably my favorite professional community, because the learning, it was like a learning curve like that, you know. Working on research projects and then just discovering about the wetlands of our city and how we needed to manage them. I mean, just fascinating about the Klip River and what was driving the Klip River. And then it wouldn't just be about the river, it would be about how people had been farming on the side of the river and how they'd irrigated their crops and how that had led to a big channel, and the river didn't look like it used to 20 years ago, learning about the mining issues. So, just every day a new challenge to address. So rivers have been probably the most fascinating, and wetlands, the thing I've loved working with most. And then I've just liked being able to have an influence over the city's parks and what is happening with the city's parks. There are lots of pieces of land the council wanted to sell off many times and develop. Rietfontein Reserve, I mean, it's a precious reserve now with breeding birds that only breed there. And, you know, I had to be a fighter. I had to go out on a limb to make a case with why you can't sell this off. So sometimes they're not the big things in the lights, they're the little things where I think, I made a difference there. I saved that piece of land. That thing wouldn't exist unless I'd gone out on a limb and fought for it. Because you often have to dig deep. It doesn't come easy. You've got to go home and work till midnight, 1 in the morning, to actually make that thing happen. Nothing just is straightforward. You really have to find energy to make a difference. And then I like solving even the small things for councillors where you feel like you actually could go and there was a challenge and they couldn't get it right, and you go in as a sort of mediator and you bring the right people and the ingredients, or you found the money on a budget, and then you actually manage to, you know, make a difference. So that, you know, offhand I just can't bring them all to mind, but lots of small projects where I've managed to fix things. I'm still trying to fix some dams. That's not going that well. It's going very slowly, and they haven't been fixed before I leave this place. So that's a bit of a regret, bittersweet. Hopefully City Parks will carry on and fix them when I leave. And then another thing we did a hydropodology study, and it changed how even the Department of Water and Sanitation see hydropodology, because I just went to a seminar. It was fascinating. It said this is how water and rain falls on soil, and this is how water and soil affect development and affect the rivers. And so I managed to convince my boss to find us some money, and we got research done by the University of the Free State. And that also, we suddenly learned all sorts of things about our city and why we're getting groundwater problems and where we're developing and why we shouldn't develop there from this one little study. You know, that's why I say it's like, I sometimes call myself an organic catalyst, because I don't always, sometimes I'm just working, changing things that lead to other things, if you like. So suddenly hydropodology is something everyone's doing for all the developments because it makes a difference. It means you can have less cracked buildings and less things. And another thing that springs to mind is Cosmo City. I don't think everyone would love me for it though, because it doesn't look very nice now, but we did try and save the beautiful conservation area in Cosmo City. Unfortunately, it's being dumped on, people break the things. We didn't get all the design things right, but we did try and save it because it was a precious piece of conservation area through Cosmo City. So some things we learned lessons, how we would do it differently next time. Next time we do a lot of things differently in retrospect.
You left your mark, Mrs. Eagle, and you can see it in the projects that you've steered. As you were talking now about the rivers and the catchments, water quality, the housing development projects, Cosmo City, and etc. You've left your mark. Does it feel that way?
I hope so. In my own reckoning, I've achieved some things and I haven't achieved others. I've got a lot of things where I think, please just give me another 5 years. I need to do that. You know, the problem in local government is that, and I'm afraid it's become more so, I think I had a lot more freedom to change the world and leave my mark in the early years. We were smaller, it was easier to navigate the city, it was easier to negotiate with your colleagues, to find the money. And as the cities got much bigger and bigger, obviously the challenges have got bigger, the budgets have got more stressed because you're trying to look after more problems with less money. And I think though it's also become very bureaucratic. So, you know, if I criticize what's happening in the city, it's that government has made us so over-regulated. Everyone's trying to stop corruption and get reporting and monitoring. So we spend all our lives, more of our lives on reporting, monitoring, compliance, risk, and less time is left to actually do the work that makes a difference on the ground. And I've really felt that You know, you can be seen to be working hard. You're all scurrying around, you're in your meetings, you're handing in your reports, you're ticking all the boxes, and you're having all your reviews, but it doesn't necessarily make you a better person. It doesn't actually mean you'd work better. I think I worked better when there was less pressure on trying to control how I did my work. There was actually, you just had more time to actually get on and do the job. So that has been quite a regret. I've seen a shift, and I would say it's left me a bit frustrated because you have to service those things. They're part of the system. It goes with the compliance, and the Municipal Finance Management Act says you have to do all those things. So they just are what come first. And then sometimes it leaves less time to actually fix things that you're trying to fix. And so I've left quite a lot of things still unfinished. I say to my colleagues, I'm going to be a very irritating old lady sitting out there as a resident saying, what about that? What about that? But I told them they can call me anytime as well.
Jane hopes she made everyone she worked with brave enough to continue the fight for the environment.
Mrs. Eagle, to many you are known as the city's environmental stalwart. Is there anything that you would like to add in terms of what legacy do you hope to leave in this space?
I hope I've made people a bit braver to fight for the environment, because it's true. Even as a planner, you know, I used to have to go to sites and where they wanted to come and develop, and I'd stand there. You go there in the middle of the day, the sun is shining, the birds are singing in the trees, and you know they're going to come and chop all these trees down and kill all these birds, and all these monkeys are losing their homes, and you know, it used to distress me. So it was sort of a better fit in a way to become the protector rather than the developer, but there is always a bit of both. But I hope that I have made my colleagues, well, first of all, I hope they've learned, because I try and pass on all the knowledge that I've picked up along the way. I try and put it down in writing. I write very long comments on applications, and in a way, I'm doing that to try and also educate even the developers and the professionals, the engineers and everyone. So I hope that I've done a little bit of educating to change the way that they see things. And I hope that for my colleagues, I've made them also see things a bit differently, and then brave. You know, you've got it's very hard standing up for the environment, eh? It's the Cinderella. Even though people pay lip service to it, at the end of the day, roads, houses, the economy are always seen as more important, and the environment, well, we'll try and protect it. It's never seen as the thing you need to protect. And when we have got climate change, I don't think people understand how devastating climate change is and how much the environment is the thing that's going to save us. It's the trees that are going to help clean the air, stop the flooding, and keep the temperatures down. It's not buildings and air conditioners, because they take energy and they need more from Eskom, and they cost money and they have negative impacts as well. So nature is doing it best. So to try and get people to value nature and to see that nature is really where the solutions lie has been my mission. And I hope that I hope colleagues don't bow to too much pressure, because, you know, I haven't always been popular, hey? You have to...
Too strict.
I'm quite strict. Well, some people think I'm not strict enough, because I'm also a mediator. In local government, you can never... I am hardline, but you can never be hardline and rigid. You can't. You will never win. You must always try and come with a compromise. And I think the one thing I see sometimes with people who take a hardline position, they don't help solve the problem. It doesn't go away. I always say to people, it's never going to go away. If there's a site where everyone wants to develop, you can go on defending it. But one day it's going to fall unless you come with a solution that meets everybody's needs and solves the problem. So I have been quite strict, but I've also been, I hope, quite pragmatic in trying to give and take. Some of the compromises I'm not happy with. There are a few here that I think, oh, that was bad. I got had there. I should have been stricter. I should never have compromised on that one, because people are not always honest. Honestly, you have to have eyes in the back of your head. They change lines on maps, and if you're not looking, suddenly you get something on the ground that's not what you hoped you'd negotiated with them for 6 months. So there are a few of those I see. I don't like looking. Sometimes I drive and I just can't look at one or two developments there on Bears and Nadir that I think, oh my gosh, I didn't do well there. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. But hopefully I made a difference. You know, my motto is you can't win it all, but if at the end of the day you made it a bit better than what it was going to be, then you've still achieved something. So I always say to people, don't be disheartened. If you can't protect the whole of 100% of the ridge that you wanted to protect, but if you manage to protect 70%, you still did better than what you were going to get if you weren't there. So do you go to sleep at night knowing you made a difference to the world? That is what I want to know.
With that motto and also what you just said, what legacy you want to leave, I hope I made people braver to fight for the environment. I think that's just it. That was said so beautifully.
No, thank you. I hope so, because I say to them, please be honourable and be brave. Is sort of my two things I wanted to say.
Be honourable.
Because
and
honour
brave.
also comes into it, because you can easily just give up and go and eat lunch. And I'm saying to people, don't give up and go and eat lunch. Please fight.
Mrs. Eagle, what words of wisdom do you have to those who will follow in your footsteps?
Well, in a way that, be honourable and be brave. Always learn and always look for solutions. And basically you have to work hard. You know, there's also something, just work hard. Things won't come easy. So, you know, I sat with my guys last week, and what I said to them is, take the opportunities that local government gives you. Take the opportunities that are here that you might not see. And I tried to tell my story to get them to see that actually there's more scope here to make a difference than you might think. It's too easy to come in and just wait for the work to come to you and just do the production line. And I said to them, you mustn't. Think about what skills you've got. They might be different from my skills. Think about what you've learned in all your other jobs. Come in here, look at our challenges, and then step forward and say, I think we need to be doing X. I think we need to be doing Y. You know, speak out, challenge this, what you found, and see how you can help to make a difference. So be brave also in the sense that go and say to your boss, I need money, I need a budget for this, because actually this project needs to happen, and convince them why it needs to happen. So step out of your comfort zone and actually just try and it also makes your job interesting. Then you don't get bored. Then you will also end up saying fascinating at the end, because it means that instead of just coming here and it's just a means to earning a salary every day, you actually come in here knowing that you're a better person, you make a difference, and you are taking advantage of all that your job has to give you. Because, you know, local government actually is, it's actually quite a privilege to work here. And I don't say that lightly, and I also don't mean to say it as a platitude. It is a privilege to have worked for local government. I really feel. Many other jobs you could have done. But, you know, I don't have a single regret spending 33 years at the council. And I would have spent some more if they'd let me.
What's next for you, Mrs. Eagle?
I'm just going to have a bit of a rest first. Well, I don't think I'm first going to have a rest. I think actually the next few months I'll be spending clearing out all the paper and still there's a bit of a tail end here. But I've got a lot of things I want to do that are just my own personal things, you know, things that you do in retirement, hobbies, you know, sorting out and knitting and weaving and gardening and spending more time with my dogs. So those are just personal things I want to do. But I don't think I can quite just let go of all the things I've been working on for 33 years. So I'm hoping that I might have some opportunities to maybe be a consultant on one or two projects, and whether I'm paid or not paid, I don't really care. And you know, there are even things I've left unfinished here, like one of the things we wanted to do was write a handbook for the stormwater design manual, because it's a very fat document that most people don't understand, and we wanted to make it more user-friendly, like a user manual that helped ordinary people read it and understand it. And so I said to my colleagues, if they still let me, maybe I can sit at home in retirement and write the user manual that we never had time to do while I was here. So I've got a few things lined up, yeah.
Any traveling plans?
Traveling, not immediately. I'm going traveling immediately on the day I retire. I'm traveling because I'm going to my nephew's wedding.
The wedding.
So yeah, so I'm actually heading off, which is a bit difficult because it's the end of financial year. And you see, I'm a control freak. I will be sitting in London worrying about whether the invoices have been raised as an accrual for finance year end. That's just how I am. You see, very ordently. But I don't. I'm a homebody. I'm a Taurian. I love to stay at home. So my sister's in Cape Town. I might move to the Cape along with everyone else one of these days, but I'm not in a hurry. I thought actually I'd just like to spend some time. We work such long hours here. I'm always working. Every night the laptop comes out. There I am. So just to be able to sit and watch a series and not worry about the fact that you should be writing comments might be quite nice. So I just want to rest at home for a while. We are always, local government, you are never off duty. The city owns you. They really do. If the city manager's office phones you at literally 8:30 on a Friday night, well, you pick up the call and you take it. If your boss sends you something on a Saturday and says, I've just sent you the budget, please look at it and send me comments by 5 o'clock, you tell your friends, sorry, I can't join you, I've got to send the budget, and you sit down and you do it. That is just, we are sort of deployees in a way. We are, we are cadres of a different kind. When you work for local government, it's sort of it's like a calling almost. I don't want to call it a calling so much, but you really are. It's a full-time job for the city. If there's an IDP meeting on a Saturday, well, then that's your Saturday. A month and a half ago, I was presenting the stormwater, something on the catchment plan to the mayoral committee at 10 o'clock at night was my item. And there you are, Friday night, presenting your item. So that's why I say it's almost, I don't know how I'm going to make that transition. It's almost like I'm going to wake up and wonder, gee, not that I'm a person who doesn't have hobbies and interests. I have many that I haven't been able to do, but it's more that the life has been so, in a way, so dedicated to the city. It will be quite weird to wake up and think almost I'm a free agent. What do I do today? It's not like there's the to-do list, which is never finished. So that will just be a novel experience.
Let's go into personal questions now, Mrs. Eagle.
Yeah.
If you had to describe yourself in 3 words, what words will you use?
Tenacious. Sometimes, I'm a bit blunt. I don't know how you'd say it, but that's why I'm not everyone's cup of tea. People have had to get used to me. A lot of my colleagues, when they first met me, very honest. But I deliver things quite fiercely sometimes because I'm so passionate. You could say passionate, I suppose. It's the other side of the coin. But until people realize I'm passionate about something, sometimes they're not always happy with the delivery, and then I'm often in trouble. But I'm passionate, and most of my colleagues have learned that when I'm very vehement and expressing myself, it's because I care about the subject. So passionate, yeah. And then I'm very committed, actually. I'm very committed. If I put my mind to something, I will really try and make it happen.
Committed, passionate, and tenacious.
Yeah.
I love it. And where do you hail from?
And I like to think I have integrity. I have never once been bribed, ever, in council. And no one has actually tried to bribe me, which I found quite interesting, given how widespread I know it is. And obviously, I like to think they looked at me and decided that I wasn't bribable, which should be a good thing, shouldn't it? But no one ever tried to bribe me. It was so funny in my career.
Mrs. Eagle, where do you hail from? Just
I'm
a little
actually
bit of background.
I was born in Johannesburg, believe it or not, in Parktown West. My father was a physics lecturer at Wits. And then when I was quite little, still about 5, I think, we moved to Pietermaritzburg. So I grew up in Natal. So I've always felt a little bit like I'm not a Joburg girl, which I sort of prided myself on. Like I'm here in Joburg and I'm solving Joburg's problems, but I like to think I brought a bit of my other perspective, because I trained in Natal, and Natal, in my view, was one of the best town and regional planning universities or courses in the country. And we had such interesting lecturers, a lot of them who became city managers of, one of them became a city manager of Durban. But they used to teach us about life skills and more about how to think, not just throw knowledge at us. They always said, okay, you can learn the technicalities on the job, but we want you to learn to think about why you're doing what you're doing. And it was a valuable lesson. Eh? So I always really, really loved that background that I brought from Natal. And then I came to the big city, to the job at Sandton, with a partner who thought, no, it's going to be much more exciting in the city. And then the thing is, Joburg is exciting. It's so edgy that you never leave. So even though the air quality is poor, and there's litter, and there's homeless people on the streets, and everything's the economy, it became almost a bit addictive. Certainly from a work point of view. I thought nothing else would be as interesting. And also because you feel here the biggest challenges, so I'd rather be here because this is where I can make a difference. I didn't want to go somewhere where it was too easy in a way. So so I'm a Natal girl. I'm an old, I say to people, I'm a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant from Natal. But I once had a compliment paid to me by a colleague, I thought it was a compliment, who I worked with in that early days of the new environmental department. She said, Jane, you're a black woman in a white woman's skin. And I liked that. It made me feel like she saw that I there was less barriers between us than we thought. It was really a compliment that, I'm one of them, us, we are together. So so that's me. I think I landed in the perfect career. I think it brought everything together because it's not one thing. Planning is in so many different things, Yeah.
Just as a parting shot, Mrs. Eagle, is there perhaps anything that you would like to add?
I think I've said a lot, probably. I'm going to miss my colleagues. I love my colleagues. I work with the wonderful people. I shout at them. I criticize them, but I love them. And that will be really, quite something. I've got really good friends here. I think, and just maybe to say, and I'm going back in a way, but to say one of the hard things about choosing environment when I moved from planning to environment is that it's not an objective career, it matters to me. So that means it's not like a mathematician, you can go to work every day and just deal with numbers, but your ethics and what you care about is something separate. In a way, I combine the two, which is a nice thing and also quite stressful, because it means you're not as dispassionate as you want to be sometimes. You're too involved, So that was quite a challenge. Just to say, I don't regret anything. I'm leaving feeling like I had one of the best. If I look back and think, would have I preferred to work anywhere else? Never. And it doesn't mean I'm quite critical. I shout, and there are lots of things I'm not happy with in the current job, but it doesn't mean I would regret or want to work anywhere else. And actually, I've loved working with the councillors. That's been one of the privileges. Some councillors have been better than others. But I love working with the councillors who, have given us respect as professionals, really listened to, and then also councillors who you see they really want to make a difference for their communities, and then they just make me want to help them. It's just in my nature. Give me a problem, and it's a real challenge, then I'm there to say, okay, how can I help you? You can't always fix it, but at least you try. Yeah.
Sorry, just one last question from my side. What do you do for leisure, Mrs. Eagle? You've mentioned you have 2 dogs. What's their names?
I have too many dogs. They break the bylaws. No, I do have permission for them. But no, so they are like a full-time family. I don't have kids, but my dogs are like my kids. So they keep me busy, trying to keep my house clean, walking them all, medicating, putting back the garden they've dug up. That is a full-time job. But for leisure, I play the piano. I weave when I get the time, but I've had so little time to do all those things. And I do travel. I go bird watching. I do love going away to the Kruger Park. I mean, that if you can give me months at the Kruger Park, I'll be a happy person. So, you know, that hopefully is what you get when you retire. You don't want to slow down. I don't want to get old quickly. I've watched my colleagues, because I sit on the pension fund, and I've seen how bad it can get, that colleagues retire and then 3 years later they are sick and then they die. And I don't want that to happen to me. I want to walk and stay fit, and I want to keep my mind going, and I want to keep interest in life. And I'm not going to go home. I'll rest, but I'm not going to go home to just be that retired person that sits having, you know, I don't know. I'd get bored if I just watch movies all day and drink coffee. That will not suit me. So I don't want to grow old too quickly. I'm very conscious of that. So hopefully retirement is more about changing course, not, you know, going out there to the pasture to drift off. Yeah. So I will have a lot to do. Make my garden beautiful to start with, yeah.
Mrs. Eagle, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for your time. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.